All right, call the meeting to order. Are we properly noticed?
The meeting was posted according to law.
Roll call, please.
President Johnson.
Here.
Trustee Harding.
Here.
Trustee Holmes.
Here.
Trustee Moody.
Here.
Trustee Nugent. Okay, Trustee Seeger.
Here.
Trustee Wisniewski.
Here. All right. I'm not going to read this whole thing for citizen participation, but we do have two people here from Small Business Administration. They wanted to talk a little bit about disaster relief. Is that right? So come on up. Tell us your name and tell us a little bit about the disaster relief.
All right. Good evening. Thank you for having me. My name is April Atkins. I'm a public affairs specialist for the U.S. Small Business Administration. I'm here tonight to discuss our loan programs that we provide for people who are interested in receiving information about having, for the damaged disaster homes, for disaster relief. SBA, we were notified that there was a hurricane and a mudslide back in the month of August. So we came here to help with anyone who had damaged homes, vehicles, businesses, and to provide them with that assistance in order to rebuild their lives and repair what was damaged. Since the physical damage deadline is past due, we do have a 60-day grace period that we are extending to applicants who would like to apply online. They can go online to sba.gov/disaster. We also have, we did have a few disaster recovery centers that were for applicants to come and fill out the application, but those are now closed. We did have business recovery centers. I think we have one in Milwaukee still that's open. No, my apologies. We do not. But however, they can go online to the website for more information. Also, myself, I'll be sending out an email to you all, just giving the information, having them reach out to me and my colleague Nigel as well to receive information. Does anyone have any questions for me or anything tonight?
Well, first, just thanks for coming out. I think, fortunately for us, we didn't have a lot here in East Troy, but I know Milwaukee did in the flooding there. But it's always good, yeah. So we'll take that information and we'll pass it along.
All right, sounds good. I actually have some flyers. Can I leave any with?
Yeah, please.
All right, thank you so much.
Great, thank you.
All right, have a good evening.
You too.
And happy holidays.
Happy holidays, yes. Stay warm. Okay, we'll move on to the consent agenda. One motion and a second will approve all the following items. Any item may be pulled on the list and voted on separately. There is an adjustment to the election inspectors to drop Megan Quant, our deputy clerk. She actually resides in a different county, so she would not be eligible. Sorry, utility clerk.
I'll make a motion to accept the consent agenda, removing Megan Quant as the election representative.
Second.
Questions or discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right. On to miscellaneous business. Item 1, update and discussion regarding ordinance violations at 2954 Main Street from our November 17th meeting. And we've got the property owner here. I know by email we got the written update that you provided. So, Victor, if you want to come on up and kind of walk us through. So what Eileen's got on the screen here, this was the memo that was put together after our November meeting where there was some discussion of possible code and ordinance questions that we had.
Absolutely. So just going down the list here, building permits, I don't think there's any any wiggle room on that. We will absolutely update our building permit. I'll get the ball rolling on that right away. The construction storage containers, looking at that, because the ordinance was written after we had gotten the containers and put them on site, my hope is that we can just kind of look at those as grandfathered in for the time being once the project is completed, like the new ordinance states, once we get an occupancy permit, we'll get them out of there. But as far as the conditional use conditional use permit and all of that, I feel like probably would be a lot easier for everybody if we can just kind of recognize them as grandfathered in. I'll leave that for a discussion for you guys. If a permit is deemed necessary, we're absolutely happy to go through that process as well. The inspection report and timeline, we're happy to cooperate with you guys. Matt, I know you and I had discussed kind of a standardization of that process. If we could work together, maybe Matt and Scott, if you guys could work with me to come up with exactly which line items we would like to see updated. And Matt, I am horrible with Excel. If you could help us get that into a spreadsheet, we're happy to use that as a format, update it, and keep you guys abreast of everything moving forward. Burning of materials, as Jeremy made very clear, we will cease all burning of construction materials. Work hours, I think we kind of found that there wasn't too much of an issue there. We will continue to work within that 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. time window. And like we said in the last meeting, we've given our phone number to all of the neighbors. If there's ever an issue, we're happy to work with them. I don't work super late at night. I know people have young children in the area, so we try to be as respectful with that as possible. Moving on to the exterior work, we kind of covered that in the last meeting due to where we're at with the weather and that sort of thing, and that we are going with brick. The cost to put up a temporary shelter and all of that on there is just astronomical. So we'd like to resume with the brickwork in the spring. Project status, let's see. Yeah, so we're moving into mechanicals at the moment. We have had a little bit of a scheduling conflict with some of the subcontractors on that, but we are hoping to have plumbing getting started right after the holidays here. We're in the design phase of our HVAC. That's going to get started probably right after the first of the year here. And electrical is going to be kind of piggybacking with the two of those. So we're hoping that probably end of January to the middle of March, we're going to be ready to close up all the walls on the interior, get our final inspection done there, and move on to the interior finishes.
I guess on the container, I think, if we were to follow ordinance, it would require, and I get that was passed after you got it, it would require you to take it off of the property and then bring it back. I don't think that does anybody any good. I think it disrupts the process. Mm-hmm. There is a process, and I know Eileen and I spoke with Orrin, our zoning administrator. I think there's a process for a temporary permit. I think if you work with staff on that,
Sure.
That'd probably be better if the board is amenable to that as a process. Yeah, I think we covered the burning. I appreciate that, given the concerns from the neighbors. Other questions or comments from anyone else? Things you want to dive into?
Got an Excel spreadsheet that you don't have to develop one. I have it.
You already have a template.
I already have a template.
Awesome.
We're good to go.
Fantastic.
Project management template, so we're good. The only other thing is, we had talked about the envelope, the outside being wrapped up. I understand
Yep.
the zip wall can maintain for an extended period of time, but aesthetically, we'd want to have that enclosed before occupancy would happen with the building. That'd be the one contingency. If you're not starting anything until after the 1st, I'm guessing that you may not have everything wrapped up until maybe March at best.
Yeah, yeah.
So then April comes and you're hopefully then on to brick and starting
Yeah.
that process, the exterior.
Absolutely.
And still within a time frame that helps you with occupancy.
Yep.
Again, I'm extending the opportunity if you want. I've got a lot of great contacts for some inexpensive materials to help with the process and the budget.
Very good.
So anything you want, I guarantee you I have leads on it. So
Very good.
please lean on me if you need it.
Will do.
So we can discuss offline, maybe we can find some time. You know, I'm around over the next couple of weeks. If there's a slow time during the holidays, maybe the three of us can get back together over there.
Sounds great.
We can coordinate that separately.
Maybe here if it's a little cold there.
Yeah. Well, I guess
Or
you got to get the
someplace.
HVAC work done. Okay, other questions, comments? Okay,
All right.
great. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Have a good night. All right, we're on to item 2, update and discussion regarding the well siting study. Jason.
Okay, tonight with us we have Ryan Wood from Strand Associates. They're the firm we're working with on this project. Ryan does have a presentation with him tonight. It's actually the same presentation you all saw at the last meeting, with the exception of a couple of the last slides have been modified. And Ryan's going to update us on some of the questions you guys had from that last meeting.
Oh, can you hit the little person icon there?
Yeah, thanks for having me here. Appreciate your time. I've been at Strand for 19 years. I'm the quality control engineer on this project. Ben Wood and I began a month apart 19 years ago. We are not related to each other. It was kind of weird, but both working for East Troy, so it's been fun. So I think we can probably skip down to slide 19. And if anyone wants to go back to look at any of these during the discussion, I think that's appropriate. So here's kind of what our ask was at the end of last meeting, and then there was some things that you all wanted us to come back with. And obviously our goal is, if we decide to go forward with well 10, picking out that site sooner rather than later. Ben said no later than 3 months, which is now 2 months away from today. That'll still be a pretty tight time frame, especially with some of the submittals that we have to turn in to the Wisconsin and Public Services Commission and the DNR. But I think that's still a doable time frame. And then there was the discussion of the test well. We did go back and look at options there, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit more detail. And then just a little bit of discussion on the timing and what's needed to still be able to get that grant funding. That's would need plans and specs by June 30th. So we can go down one slide here. Again, here are the follow-ups. One thing that was asked about last time was just to bring in a little bit more detail and discussion on how we got from, moving away from well 8 towards a new well 10, and then we'll focus on the site a bit, and then the drilling alternatives. That's more, test well or a borehole, or if there's any other technology out there that we can use to try to get a better idea. We did a little bit of digging there, and we came back with one alternative, but it's not really just a desktop one. It's still an invasive test. And then while we're not presenting on it, there's a presentation presentation by Brian, I believe, afterwards to talk about rates and rate impacts with this project. So we can go down to the next slide here. This was a requested discussion with kind of costs for well 10 versus PFAS treatment at 6 and 8 versus PFAS treatment only at well 8. We put the OPCC, the uphitting of probable construction cost, in that middle column there on the right. The other thing that we did is we included the anticipated well capacity, because while the treating well 8 is the lowest cost, when we look at cost, and this is capital cost per 10,000 gallons treated, then it looks a little bit less favorable. And East Troy is growing, and if you look back to the 2023 master plan, there are growth trends there that indicate, kind of regardless of what happens here, a new well discussion is probably out there. So, any questions on these costs here before we move on?
Is the 7.3 for Welton, does that include the siting?
Yes.
Okay.
That includes a test well with treatment, and I did listen to the presentation that Ben gave to you guys a month ago. And that also does include the well abandonment cost of well 8. So that was in that number, so,
Okay, so that's all in. So
Yep.
okay, that's really helpful. Thank you.
yep.
And I think that's the important takeaway on this slide, is the fact that if we do go down the road of well 10, we have additional capacity that we don't currently have today. If we look at treating 6 and 8, we get back to where we are today from a capacity standpoint. Yes, we get the redundancy of 4 wells again, but we're at where we are today for a capacity. With well 10, we see additional capacities. Just something to chew on.
Yeah, and the other kind of uncertainty here, and Ben talked about this too, is that well 10 cost does include treatment costs, which, there's a potential that we're not going to have all those costs, right? Whereas with the well 8 or 6 and 8 costs, those are known costs that probably aren't really going to change. So, can move on to the next.
Can I just, a quick question? I
Yep.
know there was some discussion about whether or not a test well was necessary or would be beneficial given the cost. Is the recommendation to do the test well first?
We're going to talk about that in 1 minute. So let me go through here and then we'll, yeah, you're thinking right along where we're going here. So just going back to the schedule for the water or for the Safe Drinking Water Loan Program, each project can get up to $1.6 million in principal forgiveness. So ideally, getting this advertised in June is likely what's best for the village here. We've turned in our intent to apply for well 10. We did talk to the DNR between last meeting and then now, if we did want to change to, try to use those as funds for well 8 instead. They told us maybe, probably, but we'd have to prepare a letter and with a justification, and then they'd look at it at that point in time. It wasn't a firm yes, but it also wasn't a no. But the one thing that they did note is we'd have to have advertisement documents ready by the end of June, and that's a pretty big ask to design the demo of well 8 plus a new treatment plant by the end of June, that would be we want to start like now discussions. So just things to consider there. Let's move on to the next slide unless there's any discussion on this. And again, here are the sites on the southern part of town with that, again, kind of beige line with the anticipated shale layer there. I don't think we need to go into detail on this yet. I think we should maybe come back to this if we need to. I think there's a star that's missing on this page, which is, maybe if you go down, just hit down once. I wonder if it's gonna pop up. And maybe once more. There we go. So yeah, the larger yellow star there is one where we think we can do the most with on the site, but because that is just one giant site there, if we do go down the route of wanting to drill a well at well 10, that's when we prepare some layouts for each one of those sites, and we can pick where we want the well and plant to go at that point in time. So I don't think at this point in time you have to choose between those two stars yet. So I think right now, probably even through June, we're pretty open on where exactly we choose to put that. Obviously, the well driller's going to want to know exactly where to put the hole, but that's a pretty simple thing to change as long as we get some preliminary layouts. So we can move on to the next slide here. And Jim, here's where you were asking about the different options for a test well. We met with, I reached out to 2 well drillers. I met with one of them, and they generally thought for a deep well in this area, a test well was not the way to go. They didn't think they would get reliable enough information to justify the cost of a test well. What they recommended instead, which makes, I think, a lot of sense, is to drill just a bore hole to get the geological formation information without spending the extra cost to widen that hole, to install casings, and to put a test pump in there to get water quality. Things that we talked about where we weren't confident in the water quality testing is that, even if there is a plume coming from the landfill, if we're not pumping at the capacity. If we're not pumping at the capacity that we're going to be pumping at, then we're not getting the full water quality. We're not pulling from the extents of the aquifer. And if there is some form of surface water contaminant, even a 24-hour test isn't necessarily going to tell us anything. If we did a test pump and found a detect of PFAS, that would be telling. But if we did a pump test and we didn't get a detect, that wouldn't necessarily tell us a whole lot. So, it's an awful lot of cost for not getting a whole lot more info, whereas if we were to just do like a test bore, that's a relatively lower cost and at least gives us the geologic information, it'll tell us if that shale layer is there or not, and if it is there, how thick that layer is. And that can give us info on whether or not we feel pretty good about putting a casing in just below that, or if we want to case deeper. What we've highlighted here in kind of that beige yellow, that's that shale layer that we hope is there. That's this bore log that we have up here is pretty close to what you have at well 5. So you've got 20 feet of that shale right now, and that's doing a good job currently because that's right near well 6 and 8, which has PFAS, and well 5 doesn't. So we know that shale layer is providing that protective barrier. The other colors I have here are in green. That's a formation that produces pretty good water quality. But if we were concerned if that shale layer was not there, we would then what we could look at doing is casing through that entire greening layer, because there is shale at the bottom of that, and plus it also gives us another 400 feet of filtration in basically from any surface water. So in that case, then we'd be pulling mostly from the purple and blue aquifers there. Again, that purple layer is a pretty good water producing layer, but is typically having higher iron levels, and the blue, again, is that Mount Simon that has higher radium, but not a lot of iron or manganese. So, those are still two pretty good formations that we want to get water out of. And ideally, well 5 also has that green layer. So, it'd be best if we could only case down through the first shale. But even if that's not there, I think there are things we can do at the well 10 site to still give us pretty good confidence in the quality of that water. So, any questions on that? I guess one more thing, we did look into if there's any ground penetrating radar or any things like that. That's not really an option. For a client nearby, we talked to the Wisconsin Geologic Society, and they do have some interest in, once we drill a test well, doing some samples on the cuttings, but they don't have a whole lot of interest in, being involved early on in the project. So that's what I have for discussing kind of the test well versus test bore versus do nothing option. I think with the landfill fairly close by and the shale layer being unknown, I do think it pays to know at least a little bit of something before you spend $1 million on a full hole. So, I'd lean towards at least doing the test bore at this point in time. So, any questions before we move on to the next slide? I don't think there's a I don't think there's a whole lot left, so.
What, I guess, what confidence level would you have with the test bore information that you get?
Well, we would have complete confidence in what's there. You know, so that's 90+% of, is that shale layer there? And if it is there, is it 5 feet thick, 10 feet thick, or 20, right? So knowing what's there helps us create a better bid for a driller to put a competitive price on, because if we do, the risk of not doing a test bore is then the contractor doesn't know if they're putting a casing in, 280 feet deep or 750 feet deep, and that changes which rig they're bringing out. That changes how much steel they order. That changes their project schedule, because to case an extra 250 feet, that's probably, that's probably another month of drilling. So that changes a lot of things. And, typically when things get off by more than 25% from what is bid, that's when contractors come back and say, hey, we don't have time to do this. It's going to be extra. Like, we didn't plan on this. That's going to be extras. So I think there's benefit in saying, hey, you're going to come out and drill and case this deep, and we're going to be pretty close on that amount. So I think it gives you a little bit more confidence that your bid price is what it's going to be. So I think that's the benefit there, so.
I think was it PFAS shut down well 8, right? So, would there be a concern? Would we have a PFAS test during the test bore, and would that kind of rule out the PFAS? We'd hate to spend $7 million and then
So
we can't use it.
I think that's part of the, I'll use the word beauty, I don't know if that's right or not, of the test bore. There's a possibility we do this test bore and we don't find that confining layer of shale that we're hoping for, which is really what would isolate any potential surface contamination to the aquifer we want to get to. We may have to walk away from this hole after we do that, but I'd rather spend $80,000 to do that, and versus $1 million like Ryan's talking about. But with what we're proposing here in the test bore, there's actually no water pumped. It's just taking that cross section of the formation to understand, which then they can utilize in designing a well. And again, after we do that, there's the possibility we may walk away from that hole and say, no, we don't want anything to do with that.
Yes, so talking next steps, if you do the test bore, and that shale is there, this project becomes relatively straightforward. If we do the test and the shale is either not there or it's very, very thin, then that's when we probably come back and we've spent the $80,000. Then we come back and we have another discussion of, do we just case deeper at this site and do a full well at that point in time, and during that well project, which is $1 million, we would do test pumping at that point in time, but then you're $1 million in, but we've cased deeper and we're feeling better about it because we're deeper. Or do we say, hey, there's not that shale there, I won't risk spending that much money on a hole that I'm only pretty confident in. Then it's, let's step back and there's other sites that we looked at that aren't as ideal, but then we're probably going north and west. You know, this school site, you know, that's on the west side of town. There's not a water main there, but that's a spot that is going to have that shale. It's not in an ideal spot for where there's growth occurring. It's not an ideal spot where there's water main, but it is, you know, we feel pretty good about what the water quality is going to be there because that shale is going to be there, right?
But
So-
it could also affect well 5.
Yeah.
That's the other challenge.
Yeah, there's whenever we're doing a project where there's unknowns, and this one has, you know, quite a few, it's, you know, how much risk can you tolerate? You know, and it's, you know, that's up to the village.
I like that we got an alternative. That was the thing I was most nervous about with the last presentation is just, you know, we're going to do a test, and a test is $1 million. An $80,000 to $100,000 test is, you know, in the scale of your previous slide with the numbers, you know, is about 1.5%. So I'm much more willing to go into that. I guess if, let's say we drilled the test bore, we like the geological structure there, would we then need to have a discussion about making that a full test well?
Then we would just abandon that hole and drill a full, we'd prepare plans and specs and drill a hole 15 feet west. You know, we won't put the test hole exactly where we want the permanent hole, but we'll put it close enough where we feel pretty good about it.
But I think what Matt's asking is, would we do a test well at that point? Or would we just move on to well construction?
I think, again, it's up to your risk tolerance. Do you, if we know that the shale is there, and we feel, if we know that the shale is there and it's, you know, 15, 20 feet thick, we then feel pretty confident that we're going to be protected from surface water contaminants. You know, at the end of the day, like, you guys are the ones that take on that risk. If you want to drill a test well just to confirm, we can do that. But again, you're looking at, you know, $600,000 plus $1 million then, right? So.
Yeah, I think, you know, again, assuming that shale is there, then, you know, do we get down to the purple layer there or the blue layer? That'll tell us then. I'd rather save that money from the test well for any type of iron or, you know, radium treatment that we might have to add to this to keep the project, you know.
If there is similar amount of shale at this site as there is at well 5, like, we try, I would recommend we try to match the well construction of well 5. Like, that's, you know, that's been a winner for the village, right? So that's, you know, and again, I think once we get that info, there's a lot of kind of what ifs that we can talk about at that point in time, if that's the direction you're leaning, because it's, you know, what's going to happen is, you know, if it's 2 feet thick, if it's 5 feet thick, if it's 10 feet thick, like, those are all things that, you know, we'll probably be having a different conversation based on, you know, if it's matches well 5, I think we're feeling great. You know, any less, you know, for every foot of less, we feel a little less confident, right? So let's maybe wait to have those what if kind of conversations until we know what we're talking about.
Do we need to take any actions tonight then?
So in talking with Ryan today, this is something we're going to want to move on relatively quickly for. As you remember, we do have some funds from the PFAS class action suit settlement. So we do have some funds there. I think next steps would be for Ryan to provide us a proposal to get a test bore out to bid, right? Isn't that what you would see as the next steps as well?
Yeah, I think we want to do that quickly. We talked a little bit about this too, is that, just based on the timing of when we ultimately need plans and specs prepared by June, I think we send out a simple proposal letter to, 3 or 4 drillers that can do this type of work. And I don't think we prepare, detailed plans and specs to do that. It might not be a reimbursable project through the funding agency, but based on both schedule and just our time and cost to prepare a DNR loan funding package, I don't think that there is enough time to prepare that, advertise that, bid that, and have the work done in order for us to get info to act on to design the phase 2 of that by June. This is if we kind of go the proposal letter type method, that's something that we can then get out in, probably early January. It's not, does it need to be publicly bid? That's or if you get 3, private bids, I don't recall what the villages require.
I think it will need to be publicly advertised and bid, yes. But I agree with you. I think an RFP process is probably the way to do this, rather than full contract documents.
Yeah.
So Jason, in the PFAS lawsuit, do we have enough to cover not only the process of putting it out to bid, but also the work of about $80,000 to do that?
So I think at 80,000, actually, we were projecting the work to be at 65 and then some money for administrative costs for Strand. So that we were projecting 80 grand all in to do the test bore. I guess we need to see their proposal for sure. And I don't remember, I thought we had a couple $100,000 in that. Okay. And so far, I think we've spent on the well siting 50,000, so.
I think for schedule-wise, and we can chat about this, but if we're preparing a proposal letter and a drawing that gets advertised, maybe we do that on the on-call, just to keep it moving. I think if we wait to get approval for our services to prepare a proposal, that then doesn't probably get approved until the end of January, which means we don't start work until the end of January, and then, I think we're gonna run into timing problems that way too.
And when you say approval, you mean on your end? I mean, because we can get it approved relatively quickly. It's you getting it through your process is what you're talking about,
It's
right?
probably 2 weeks for us to get you a task order to do that work. And I think, depending on what you're after, if it's as easy as preparing a modified spec, bid tab, and proposal letter, I think we can do that relatively inexpensively, but we can have that conversation afterwards too.
So just to keep things moving, what if we give you a motion and an approval to negotiate and do an agreement to $80,000 or $90,000 using those PFAS funds to fund this, just so you don't have to bring it back to us. So if you guys work through what you can this week and just keep things moving, I don't, I think, assuming the board is in agreement with this as an approach, like, that we just keep things moving.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, I guess that was a motion. All right, you can make it, my motion is that authorize staff to negotiate a contract with Strand on the test bore for up to $90,000 out of the PFAS funds.
So the contract with Strand is going to be way less than that.
I'm sorry, thank you, with Strand and whoever else for up to $90,000 to get this out to bid.
I'll still second that.
All right, questions or discussion on that? Do you go with that, Jason?
Yep.
All right. All's in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
One last question. Eileen, if you could bring up the, back to that presentation, sorry. I wanted to know if the board had any thoughts on those 2 yellow stars we looked at in potential sites. I had a chat with Eileen earlier today about this to see, I mean, from a development perspective, what site would work better for development. And I just wanted to see if the board had any thoughts on either of those 2 locations for potential well.
Yeah, I think last time we talked about the bigger star, because we're connecting those 2 roads, right? The
That
2
is correct.
cul-de-sacs?
In the upcoming construction season, we're going to complete that loop.
And maybe using the bigger one, the bigger star, because if you go to the smaller one, then there's, I don't know how much opportunity there is for another tenant to go in that piece of land. I don't know how big that property is and how much you need, but
Okay, and that's certainly something we can look through as we work through site layouts, but again, I just wanted to know if there was any initial feedback.
I figure they're different sizes for good reason, so. Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very helpful. I feel better. You know, a tenth of the price of what I thought, so always good. All right. I think we're still on quasi-same topic. Item 3, Financial Management Planning Workshop number 4. Water and sewer utilities, including the rate discussion and possible direction to staff. So we have Brian from Ellers.
Hey, everybody. So we're going to talk through kind of the water utility for the most part, but also bring back the sewer utility from our discussions. I think that was back in July, if not September. So looking through that presentation that you just saw from Strand, updating kind of the water utilities 10-year outlook and impact on rates relative to that project, as well as operating assumptions, et cetera. And again, remember the goal of these, as we talked about with the sewer utility, we want the utility to be fiscally sustainable, that it supports itself. So in order to do that, the primary metrics that we look at is you maintain debt coverage, right? So revenues against cash expenditures, whatever's left over, you have $1.10 for every dollar of debt service at minimum. You want to be higher than that, but at minimum, that's your absolute criteria to make sure that you can support yourself. Also remember that we're operating a utility that from time to time has some maintenance expenditures that are unpredictable. So that extra 10 cents, right? Generally, we do want that a little bit higher because we can't predict main breaks. The reserves also to help protect against some of the volatility as well as inflationary costs on future projects. So we generally recommend 5 months of operating expenditures plus next year's debt payment as your total restricted and unrestricted target working capital. So you generally have restricted funds for your debt payments. So if you think about it, unrestricted cash should really be about 5 months of operating expenditures. And then in order to accomplish these tasks, we do a 3-step process. We look at, a historical review of the utility, some PSC education, which is riveting discussion, and then future projects and rate impacts. So if we would get to the riveting discussion on the PSC, that starts on the next slide. So you got 2 levers you can pull when you're adjusting rates with the Public Service Commission. Remember that you are regulated on the water utility side, so it's not as easy as the sewer utility where you're just following your ordinance and adopting a resolution to change your rates. Here, you have to be eligible or know when is a good time and then go forth to the PSC and be approved. So those two levers to adjust rates is called a simplified rate case, I've shorthanded to SRC, and conventional rate case, which I've shorthanded to CRC. Simplified rate case, you're eligible only once a year. It's an inflationary adjustment set by 6 people that sit in an office in Madison, so whatever you think inflation is not what they think inflation is. You have to follow their rules. And then you can only do so many of those. So remember, once a year, it's relatively small, and you kind of got to be eligible, and then you can only, do so many. That's a big, important part when you're thinking about funding a big project, because you can only grab so much in a short period of time. The other option is a conventional rate case, which we actually just did one not too long ago. That concluded in 2024, in March of 2024. The problem with that is it's a full rate review. We ask a bunch of fun questions of staff, and the PSC kind of audits the utility, as well as they update all of the rates, and they'll generally want their math, which we're going to talk about on the next slide. So this chalkboard identifies the American Water Works Association, kind of writes the code on how to develop utility rates in the United States. 2 general methodologies to answer the question, how much revenue should we generate from user rates? One is called the cash basis, that's on the left-hand side. If you recall from the sewer utility presentation, I liken this to kind of your personal budget. You think about your gas and groceries or your day-to-day expenses. That's your operating and maintenance expenses for a utility, and as taxes, transfer payments, right? Those first 2 buckets are your day-to-day expenses. Then on your personal budget, right, you got your mortgage payment or car payment, whatever you might have in terms of debt. Utilities similarly, right, may have some debt that it needs to take care of in terms of annual payments. The last one is kind of like that fluff fund for a personal budget, right? That's getting the kids toys for Christmas or whatever it is. For a utility, it's a little bit bigger. Not to say you don't buy big gifts for your kids. It's more the cost to put in, assets, even buy small equipment is very expensive. So, you want to annually be able to pay for meters or generators or other small equipment items and not have to rely on debt service 100% of the time when you need to go replace capital. So that's your last one, cash, funded capital. Add all those up, you subtract your non-rate revenues, right? Cell towers, rents on a water tower, other things like that that are non-rate revenues, and that builds your revenue requirement. What's awesome about this is if we had an eraser, we could just erase the left-hand side because the PSC strictly follows the right-hand side. This is imperative that you understand how this works. Same 2 cost buckets at the top, your day-to-day expenses. But then the last 2 cost buckets, depreciation, that's just auditor math, right, to say what was the original install cost divided by its service life for that asset. That's what we're going to annually collect to replace that asset. But you add that up for all of your assets, and that gets your annual depreciation expense. What you haven't factored in is what it costs when you put in the pipe in the ground or whatever that asset is in 1975 is wildly different than it is right now in 2025. You're not factoring in inflation yet into the equation, as well as if you did use debt, you're not factoring in your interest expense. So the last cost bucket is kind of a relatively nuanced item, but they call it rate of return on rate base. And so the PSC kind of sets that. I'll explain it. It's a little easier to explain via numbers, so I'll do that shortly. But you add up all those cost buckets, subtract out your non-rate revenues, you get your revenue requirement. This is how the PSC builds rates. So if you go to the next slide, the numbers are a little small, but we've looked at the last 5 years essentially on a cash basis and a utility basis. So building up to that rate case before we started it, we had a similar presentation to explain how that PSC math works. So this is, if you can see it, focus your eyes on the bottom half. The point is, as you add capital, that rate of return or the row 3 cost bucket how that's figured out is the PSC says you got to earn whatever percent they tell you, and it doesn't matter if you're East Troy or Eau Claire. It's the same for everybody. You have to earn a certain percent on the total asset value in the system minus depreciation, so the undepreciated value of the system. So as you add capital, AKA do big projects, that considerably changes your math and considerably can change it quickly. Point being, right, if we just look example from 22 to 23, we had a not big change in the NIRB, which is your rate base, that undepreciated value. That actually remained the same. You didn't have some big project hit the books. But the PSC did change their rate of return. So they tie that to the bond market plus 2%, which I find funny because they're never in the bond market, but they determine what the bond market is, and they add 2% to it. And so they changed it from 4.9 to 6.5%, which you can kind of see that almost increased one cost bucket $100,000. The same math applies if the rate of return is relatively level, right? But you do a big project. You're talking about a system that right now has an undepreciated value of $5.7 million, and you want to do a $7.3 million project. That's going to double that cost bucket by whatever percent, the PSC says. Because, right, day one, there's no accumulated depreciation on that asset. So just kind of understand that doing a big project like this has kind of a big result in how the PSC looks at the math. There's ways that we're going to try to navigate that as we go, but I want you to understand right now, you're not eligible for a simplified rate case because you just did a full rate case, so your rates are in a good spot. You're basically what I would call about break even in terms of both math equations, but this is before our future consideration. So any questions on how the PSC math works, because this is going to be the kind of crux about what we talk about, where we're going. Okay. So then beyond 2025, right, and kind of your 2026 budget, our assumptions and considerations for building this 10-year plan: no new users or operating and maintenance, no new users and operating and maintenance expense kind of has a 3% annual inflation beyond the 2026 budget. Generally, it's hard to keep expenses going negative when you're operating a utility, but what we've seen over the past 5 years, and actually longer because we've been working for the village longer than that, you've generally been around 2% increase, so with a few years spiking due to maintenance expenditures. So we think 3% is a fair assumption to use. The new well project, understand that 7.3, or at least it's my understanding that it included the test well, at the $600,000. We just voted to not do that, do the test bore. So in theory, right, we could reduce this by about $500,000, but we didn't know that answer until 30 seconds ago. So we did include the test well. We're showing a 30-year safe drinking water fund loan at a 2.7% interest rate and no principal forgiveness. While Strand's presentation is correct, you can get up to 1.6. You're not going to qualify for general principal forgiveness based off of your demographics. You have too high of a population, too high of a median household income. You could qualify for technical PF in terms of there's certain emerging contaminants potentially. I'll leave that, in the engineer's hands as we're going, for that funding when you go to apply for the program. But generally, it might be pretty hard to get what the DNR calls general PF. So we didn't want to assume that, and then later on you hear you're not getting that grant money. The other thing is it's completed in the years based on the engineer's presentation, and we would apply cash down to those benchmarks that we talked about. So as to say, hey, what's our cash position? Can we spend some cash to lower our debt service payments? So that was also put in here, and what we have is about $620,000 that we would recommend you could apply to the project given all facts and circumstances as of today. Then all of the other projects in your water CIP, so not named well 10, all of those other ones are funded by cash as well. So We do have a good cash position that we can help pay for these projects, but just understand the well project's only getting about $620,000. Do nothing approach, while never recommended, we like to show it. It's kind of a fiscal exercise, right, to just kind of say what would be our cliff to where we'd have to do something. That cliff would come relatively quickly in terms of going below the cash benchmark. That would happen in 2027, kind of as you're starting this project. Part of that would be the cash application, right? If we wanted to apply more cash to this project, we could last longer. The other point, though, is our debt coverage. So the third to the bottom row, all-in debt coverage, is the main one you want to pay attention to. As I stated, 1.1 is your minimum need. Part of that is due to the loan covenants. But you want to keep that at 1.1. Right when your principal and interest would start on this, you would fall below that. What does that tell me reading this? You have to do a rate adjustment in order to take on this project. Is it in the amount that the PSC recommends? No. The row right below that, to kind of get to, if we had a recommendation and didn't have the regulators in play, what we would recommend to kind of get there, all things considered, would be 30.3%. You can see that in column 2028 and the second to the bottom row. So like I said, I kind of want to keep you at 1.4 coverage, which would be plenty, right? Your minimum need for the loan covenant is 110. All things in, I would say 30% gets this project done. That's with the cash application and paying for all of your other projects in cash. However, we have people in Madison that regulate the utility. So looking at that, what does it mean for our rate of return doing nothing? Again, while we really can't do nothing, this is an important slide to understand how the PSC math works as you add the assets to your rate base. So to kind of quickly run through this, focus on the bottom line in the chart where it kind of shows right now you're actually just above their rate of return. And, you know, at the year end 2025, you're just below their rate of return, but actually not by their simplified adjustments. So we're not projecting that you will be eligible based off of your 2025 financial results, where you're only 1% short, and their simplified rate case right now is 3%. That's the inflationary adjustment they would give you. We actually would predict, based off of your 2026 budget as well, that you would not be eligible at year end 26. So that eligibility criteria for a simplified adjustment, because I'll reasonably get the question, can we do something as rate-wise building up to this project? My answer to that is no, because you won't even be eligible at year-end 2026 for a 3% adjustment. You would have to, let's say, the maintenance expenses go wild in 2026. You still have to file your 26 PSC annual report to be eligible for that. You typically file that in April after the year end, right? You got to collect all your numbers, ask the auditor to compile that report, et cetera. So the point being is, even if 2026 you did have higher expenses than what you've budgeted for and you were eligible, you wouldn't be eligible until April of 2027, which is an important fact because, right, one, we're already trying to get the loan to do this project and you don't have the revenues in place. So the unfortunate truth is you kind of have to put the cart before the horse when dealing with getting a loan from the state that's very attractive in terms of its interest rate, but you have to deal with the PSC in order to get those rates in place, which does take some time. So if you look at year 2027 then, how the PSC works it is generally, it's, you know, taking the average of your added assets. So you'll actually get the median, you know, the middle there of adding this project on. That's about a 40% rate adjustment. If you were to wait to apply to the PSC for what's called a test year 2028 adjustment, they would say you need to raise your rates 85%. And if you think I'm lying, I can, you know, spend a couple hours talking about some fun anecdotes of communities elsewhere, right? In terms of when you wait the rate adjustment gets bigger. The main reason for that in this case is your full well project is online and booked into service at that point in the eyes of the PSC. So the goal here would try to kind of convince the PSC that we're taking, more or less the midway point, as best I can explain it, to get the average rate base between pre-well, post-well, and get a 40% adjustment. If you remember, all things considered, my recommendation would be a 30% adjustment within the rules in which we operate in changing rates in the state of Wisconsin as a water utility. This is your best way to get that done. The unfortunate truth, it's higher than what we would recommend. So then if you go to the next slide, that kind of shows that 39% going into place. That starts to provide some context. If you just bleed your eyes to the all-in debt coverage, we're above the 1.4, right? That should make sense because what I solved earlier said we only needed a 30%. The PSC math kind of works out that it's a 39% adjustment. So we're doing a little better than we need to, but it is the unfortunate truth in terms of how we operate within the PSC rules and their math. So more importantly, what does that mean for an average residential user? Right now, the quarterly bill, right, is for someone using 10,000 gallons per quarter is just above $100. So percent to dollar ratio, right, it's going to be a little higher. So 39% for somebody using 10,000 gallons a quarter is about $47.28. If we just kind of take that holistically as a percent applied to your fixed rate and your volume rate, right? If you think about that in a monthly impact, so you're dividing that by 3, that's about $16 change per month. The other thing that I want to reiterate as well is we aren't projecting new users into this math. We would be allowed to, going in for a test year 27 rate case, to see what the usage is at that time. And I know you do have some developments ongoing. So hopefully there would be some added usage there that might be able to help that number. If for some reason there is principal forgiveness, that would help that number. And then as well, we did show the full 7.3. So as of tonight, that number's come down. Hopefully that keeps coming down. We'll let the Woods work on that at Strand. And then beyond that, we added in the sewer rate adjustment as presented from the last time we were here talking through the full sewer utility plan. And that's more kind of, if you recall, an all-encompassing look into the facilities plan that you submitted to the state for several projects, and kind of a level impact building towards some very big projects. I think kind of triple the cost as what the water utility is undertaking. The unfortunate truth, again, we deal with the PSC on the water side, so we don't have really any navigable routes unless we write our legislators and get something done PSC-wise. But that said, as it stands today, right, the rules are the rules. This is kind of the way to get the lowest adjustment. Certainly, right, 85%. If we were to wait for the full well to come on, that's going to be double the impact, which we don't want. But in terms of how these fit together, you can then see a utility annual bill. We've just annualized the quarterly bills for both the water and sewer utility. You compare that against the median household income. Right now, you'd be at, with both utilities, about 2%, which is actually a relatively okay place to be. I'm not a big fan of the median household income stat because that's a stat for one household in the whole community, but understand that is the metric that's kind of used nationally. There's a lot of papers out there in terms of, the starting point there. They generally say if you're per utility at 2% or higher, you start to have an affordability problem there. I argue, right, you want to kind of start with low income, percentage of population, fixed income, start looking into heavier statistics there. It's just right, the data on that can always be hard to find. So I would say generally kind of the national papers, AWWA, they always kind of focus on the 2% per utility. So to that stat, in an okay place health-wise, because you're not at 4%, right, with two utilities on the page. And then kind of going to our recommendations. Given all the facts and circumstances, there's really no action needed on the water utility. We can't apply for that rate case until the earliest date would be August of 2026, where they start accepting 2027 rate applications. And you're also not eligible, if you recall, for a simplified rate case, and we don't predict any near-term eligibility there. Of course, we'll always monitor that for the village as your PSC annual reports come out. But if you do a test year 27 rate case, that yields, a rate adjustment closer to what we would recommend absent the regulators. But again, we're going to keep refining this plan as we go. Once you bid the full project, right, and get your full costs, we'll have a better sense of what you need. The one thing that I always recommend, though, is you kind of do have to start the application process to the PSC early so that you can time it out with your loan closing, because those rates do need to be in place. You may recall that from some of the, I think it was 2017 or maybe even earlier, Clean Water Fund loan on the sewer side, and making sure we have rates in place at the last time you did a Clean Water Fund with the loan with the state. So, and then the other thing is we never, in talking with staff, kind of finalized the 2026 sewer direction in terms of where you wanted to go with those rates. So staff wanted me and to kind of add this to the discussion in terms of tonight and, talk about what are we doing for the 2026 sewer utility adjustments. So that's all I have. We can open it up for discussion.
I talked to some family down south. They're talking about 150% increase for water and sewer rates there over the next 5 years. So not numbers that we want to see. We don't want to see any increases, but our numbers look great compared to that. I also think that the analysis from Strand was really helpful to show, one, the reduction for the test, instead of doing a full test well. But, when we get questions from our ratepayers, we're going to have to do either remediation or drill a well, and they're basically the same price. So I like having clean drinking water. So I think, it is what it is on the water side, I think. Anybody thoughts or comments? So I think on the sewer side, since we don't have the commission, I think we've talked about spreading that out as much as we can. I don't think there was any objection from the board about the projects that were being proposed. Were you looking for some more direction on projects or just the rate approach?
The rates for 2026, if the board wanted to see a change made.
I guess remind me again the timeline on those projects.
I think we were looking at doing some design in 2026 with some construction starting in 2027. And I know the board was wanting to do take the approach of raising rates a little bit at a time to work towards that.
When was the last time we raised sewer rates?
2021, I believe.
It's been a while.
Yeah, the last full cost of service study we did was back in 2020, and I think we waited. So 2021 sounds right. It may have been 2020, though, if my memory isn't serving me.
So it went into effect in 2021?
Yeah, probably.
Okay. All right. I mean, I think take this analysis that you've done here and basically the analysis we need to do for your project list. And as we get into the projects and we bid them and stuff, obviously we'll refine the numbers. But I think just if you can lay out then, this is what the next 5-10 years look like year over year, kind of the same, average bill here, and you're going to see this pop on the water side with this 26/27 rate case. But then, when do the sewer rate increases start and end to support the cash and the financing that you're looking to do for those?
This table is reflective of what we looked at during facilities planning, right?
Correct, all of it, and if I recall, the school street was the only TID supported, so there's, on like a down the road, I think that was like 2033 project, there was the potential of, do we consider TID funding for a different sewer project? But the school street was, yes, TID funded, the remainders were not. At the end of the day, what we're showing here, right, was kind of the level approach to be able to do all those projects on the sewer side. And if you recall my presentation, I mentioned you can choose to up this or go down. We're not recommending doing, a rate adjustment for multi-years with an action. It's more of like, what do you want to do for 2026? So one thing I may comment on there, when the sewer rates, that total plan for 10 years was developed, we didn't have the information on the water side. So now seeing a chart like this, one thing I could offer is, you do the rate adjustment for 2026 kind of as presented for the sewer utility. If you wanted to navigate around a total utility bill, that could be another option, right? So you're looking at maybe increasing the 27 and 29 and 30 and the other ones and doing nothing on the sewer side for the year that the water's going to hit. Something like that. And that's a future decision you don't have to make today. It's just another way we can present it too if you want to think it holistically. If it's 90% of the water customers are sewer customers, I can understand and respect that approach, and just wanted to bring that up for future discussion.
No, I think some of the reason we wanted that direction is because the way Ryan has presented this is that gradual approach to the sewer rates. If we don't do the increase or pursue the increase this year, it increases those gradual increases that you're seeing. The $14.50 per quarter is what is proposed right now. If we don't do that this year, just keep in mind those future years go up.
Yeah, I think we pursue what you've got here in the plan for 26. We stick with the plan. And then as the numbers come in differently, hopefully lower and more refined, then we adjust in those future ones.
So number's 1450, right?
Yeah, that's, if you recall, we did like two different kind of, if you wanted a flat percent or a flat impact. This was kind of the flat impact one that I think the board ultimately chose from the, I want to say it was June or July presentation that we kind of revisited during the public hearing for the facilities plan. So I kept the flat impact, the $14.50 per quarter, or about $5 per month.
So I make a motion then to increase the sewer utility to the recommended amount of the $14.50 for 2026.
Second.
Questions or discussion? All's in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right. I was going to ask you, tell us what you really think about the PSCW, but
I try to keep that close to the vest.
yeah,
So.
that's okay.
That was actually the best PSC math explanation I've ever seen, so thank you.
It's very good. Very exciting stuff. All right. All right, we'll go on to item 4, consider funding options for Honey Creek Nature Area Project from our December 1st meeting. Eileen? That's okay. I know, you're enraptured by the interesting.
I know, it was so exciting. All right, sorry about that. I was having some navigation issues. So we were asked as staff to review funding options. If you'll recall, when we talked about the Honey Creek Nature Area, we have the stewardship grant for up to $458,300, and that is a 50-50 matching grant. Total project cost is $817,832.50. With that being split 50-50, $408,916 would need to come from the grant as well as the village. The village had reserved $200,000 for this project, leaving a gap of $208,916. So I've presented a couple options for the board to consider. The first is the operating surplus in 2025. I'm looking at the general fund. I really do not like projecting what the operating surplus would be this, until the final numbers are in, I guess. I was going to say this early in the year, but we're pretty late in the year. But final numbers are still coming in, well into January. However, when I look at it and where we were at the last year at this time, I'm projecting we'll probably have a $200,000 surplus for 2025. Could potentially be more. That's largely attributed to revenues that are exceeding what we budgeted for those revenues, and I gave you a summary of what those are. That isn't all-encompassing. It doesn't talk about under-budget expenditures or minor revenues. In addition, we had the ARPA funds that we had allocated. The last ARPA designation that we made was for the design of the Honey Creek Nature Area. Once that project's fully paid, we will have interest earnings remaining. We weren't required by the federal government to designate the interest earnings. I'm estimating approximately $30,000. So we could apply that $30,000 in interest earnings to this project as well as surplus. And then the final option is in 2027, we are issuing a tax-exempt capital borrowing. We have that in our financial management plan. And we have the ability to reimburse ourselves for expenditures that occur before that borrowing. We recently had approved that resolution that allows me to declare that intent. So if I know that we're planning that, I can declare that intent. And by declaring that, that does not obligate us to borrow for the project, but it would give us the ability to borrow for the project if we so chose. So really my recommendation would be to first look at the ARPA funds. That makes the most sense to take that $30,000, apply it, look at the surplus funds, and then the borrowing, unless the board is inclined to add the surplus fund to your fund balance.
Something else I talked to Eileen about, if you recall during, when we've had the credit ratings, in looking at, we have a policy of maintaining 35% of our operating costs and fund balance is undesignated, and how there's some desire to get to like 40 and 45% with some of the rating agencies. So I asked Eileen, I said, if we wanted to get to 40%, what would that be? And that's about $48,000. So I think we have the opportunity here with some of Eileen's recommendations to do both. To get this project done and to move us and have staff come back to us with a policy that we're not going to be at 35% anymore, we're going to be at 40%. And that will just be how we are taking advantage of the good fortune we're in right now. So I thought the board, we were pretty excited about Park and Rec and the work that you guys have done to get this moving forward. So thoughts on Eileen's proposal here? Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want a motion?
This looked like a lot of work, Eileen. Yeah. Thank you very much for putting this together.
They make it all look easy. They make it all look easy, yeah.
You do. Okay, so what do we need to do? Make a motion? Is any direction?
I think direction is sufficient at this point, so it sounds like the consensus is to update the policy to 40%, and when we get to the point of doing fund balance designations, we'll increase that to 40. We'll use the ARPA interest, and we'll review that surplus funds, and if we have enough, we'll designate it for the project. And we can talk about that more at that time. That usually happens in March or April, and if at that time anything changes, we can decide we still want to borrow for the project. I don't think we'll have expended any project costs at that point, so we can also talk about that again.
So I think
Direction enough? Yeah.
So I think the next question for, especially going into this borrowing, that I'm going to want to know from Park and Rec is from that plan, there was like a proposed pavilion and playground. So it'd be nice to at least have some estimated costs of what those things would look like. All right, that's exciting. And is that a construction next year, Jason?
Yes, it is.
All right. Should get a trail, the 120 trail and that. All right, if nothing else on that, item 5, discussion regarding snow removal around the square. Trustee Seeger asked for this, so Scott.
Yeah, so I know that we've increased the amount of activities that we do on the square, especially in the wintertime. And we've had a fortunate number of years where we haven't had a ton of snow until after those events have kind of dissipated after, say, the first of the year. This year is a little bit different. We do everything we can to accommodate the needs with getting the sidewalk areas plowed in that square area, but it's just more traffic in that area than we've ever had before. So I just wanted to have a discussion about how the removal is happening and what you guys do every time it snows in our community with a substantial amount like we had this year so far.
So basically the way it works on the square, anytime there's a snowfall over 2 inches, the crew starts, it's kind of a staggered start. The first 2 people come in at 2:30, and they're working on the sidewalks in front of the businesses with a couple of tractors, 2 different sizes. One starts right at the building, the next one's a little bigger, so it's a little further out. And what they do is they start pulling all that snow out to the curb and cleaning off the sidewalks. And then at 3 o'clock, the wheel loader comes in, and I think at 3:30 a truck comes in, and then we just gradually work all that snow from the storefronts to the center inside parking stalls. And then what happens is once that's done, then the loader drops its snowplow, gets the snow blower, and then somebody just does laps around the inside, blowing the snow up onto the square. Under 2 inches, we don't do the sidewalks. We will still try to get as much snow as we can out of the parking stalls and get it to the center to blow it up on, just to keep ice from forming in the parking stalls. But the business owners typically address the snow on the sidewalks in less than 2-inch situations. I don't know if that, how we handle it, what we currently do.
Yeah, definitely. So the process for doing so, is there an opportunity to not put it in the square?
So I was brainstorming with staff, Chris and Derek actually, about this a little bit the other day, and we talked about a couple different things. The challenge is the timing of it all, right? So the same guys that are doing the square are also coming and doing your subdivision and all village streets to get those opened up by 7 o'clock. So usually we try to be off the square by 5 to 5:30, because that's when traffic seems to start moving around, and that's when it can become a little bit more dangerous. You know, we just want to be out of there. So again, the last guy is up there finishing blowing. He parks the blower, and then he jumps in his truck and goes to do his route. So if we were to try to do something different with the snow, either pile it somewhere else or haul it away, it would likely need to sit for a period of time, probably at least a day, someplace, right? And so that's probably going to cost some parking somewhere because we don't have the availability right then and there to be able to load it because of the timing. So we talked about a couple different things. Could you put it in the middle, on like the center line of the backside of Austin Street there? Or could we take some more to the shop? But either way, somehow, some way, that snow would need to be moved. I don't know if anybody's seen the pile that's currently at the shop, but it's pretty big. I haven't seen it that big in a long time, and there isn't a lot of room there to take more there. That's really just from clearing the parking lot there. So I'm open to suggestions. I'm not saying that this can't happen. It's going to be obviously going to cost money. It's going to be time, and then something else doesn't get done while we're doing that. What I try to envision is if we were to haul this away, how we would do that. And I think what we would try is we would try it with our trucks, which would mean finish doing the streets. And then we'd have to probably dump the salt, depending on the snow, how much snow we get. We'd have to dump the salt off those trucks, clean them out, and then we would use those trucks to haul the snow. Again, probably would have to sit until the next night because the snow blower would be in the parking lanes going in circles, and then the truck that they're loading into would have to actually be in the lane of traffic. So I think it would be something that would be safer if we did it, while traffic volumes are down. So it would, like I say, probably need to sit there, maybe around the entire square. Again, it just depends on how much snow we get. The other thing that can be a variable here is the moisture content of the snow. Blowing that, a wetter snow takes longer and is more challenging than, let's just say, a drier snow. And then I would envision hauling it up to, let's say, the ballpark or, somewhere up there to store it till it melts.
So in proximity to the square, you have the municipal lot. Is there any way of utilizing the loader to maybe push the snow into the municipal lot and eliminating those parking stalls that are being used over there?
We could. I know in the past there were some issues. We actually used to haul all of the snow out of the municipal lot, and that got stacked on the square. Because at one point or another there had been some melting and some flooded basement or something. That was before my time. So we actually started hauling the snow out of there. But I don't know, probably 10, 15 years ago, we started actually storing some of the snow in the municipal lot there. But again, it would just come down to what, parking. A storm like that 11-inch storm would take up way more of that parking lot than you realize. And we can stack it high, but only so high.
You stack it really high. I've got pictures of my kids standing on snow piles above the stop signs, so it can get really high up there. What do you guys have? Any ideas behind this? Something we can do? I want your opinions on it too. Yeah, I do.
One of the issues that I come up with
This is Derek Auger, by the way, just in case anybody.
DPW. The problem with leaving it till the next day is back-to-back storms. What do you do with it then when we got one storm that comes up with 6 inches, the next day we get another 4, which is not unheard of in Wisconsin. That last 12-inch snowfall when we had that first one, just to blow that snow onto the center of the square, that was a 2-hour ordeal just to get that moved that day. Now, if we start unloading trucks and hauling, with only 2 to 3 5-yard dump trucks, those fill up pretty fast. So you're going to probably tie up 3 to 4 guys for, I would probably say, the better part of a day. Now, when you start getting back-to-back storms and plus all our day-to-day operations, that gets a little time-consuming to be able to figure that out. Jason and I have talked about possibly putting it in other places, but like he was saying with the moisture content, well, now we get some snow that with a hard freeze, now we're breaking shear pins, and now you got a lot more problems that could arise with loading trucks. We've hauled snow before, when we had the square project. There were snow piles that were in the way from that. We tried hauling that. We found out that when the tailgates are down, the snow dumps easier, but the flares that are on the tailgate need to come off because it ends up holding the snow pile in the back of the truck. So then you're either bringing in another loader to possibly help get that snow out of the truck or hope it slides out. With a cold bed, it sometimes tends to stick. So
Can you do anything to prep the beds of those trucks to maybe help with that slide?
they're stainless steel beds. The only thing, there's really nothing, I mean, other than they're cold. You know, if you got a wet snow, wet freezes to cold, you know, they're not heated.
I'm not trying to make it like a simplified thing, but I'm thinking about my snowblower. You spray in WD-40 in the side. inside
Almost
the
like a wax or
tub.
something,
Yeah.
you're saying, kind of?
Because then it helps it out. And I'm
Pan it
not
or
trying to
something.
create more work. What I'm trying to do is make that what is our squares. It's our park, and there's a lot of stuff that goes on in that park through the winter months here. And like I said, we've had some really good years where we haven't had to worry about it, but now we do have it. So maybe the idea of the loader and putting it into that municipal lot, and then the next day or two utilizing that loader to pick up that snow excess and putting it into trucks after the snow, stops or you guys have some time to, but at least not to have it all accumulate on that square. Is that
Yep.
something that might happen?
If you, I would recommend taking a look at the pile at the DPW shop, because I'm the one who kind of just gathered that up recently. And the height of that pile right now is the max of our loader. That's as high as I can get that snow pile to push. So if we can keep it gathered into that point, and you're talking the square, a lot of those parking stalls are going to be gone. We could haul it away that way. I mean, that is definitely a feasible option, but I would hope, because I've seen the municipal lot in a weekly thing, and that lot gets pretty full. Now you start taking a lot of the parking stalls away. I mean, we could try, but it would be a learning curve no matter what we do to do it.
I just want to confirm we're all talking about the same municipal lot, right next to the old village hall, right? That's what you're, okay.
We do give permits too for people to park there overnight. We just sold one today. So, and there's 2 other cars that probably should have permits that I left an email for my officers to address. So we're looking at possibly 3 cars being parked there overnight that we give permits to. So I don't know how you're gonna get them to move if you wanna put a pile where they're parked for the night. I don't know how you designate where they're gonna park.
3 cars, we tell them that we've got to put them somewhere else. That's my opinion on it.
Isn't that a designated location for people who live on the square that can't park overnight?
Yes.
That municipal lot was made a designated location for
So
the
they
residents.
pay $180 a year to park there.
I
So,
think your concern, Scott, is more for the month of December than January and February.
I think so. I think that it slows down quite a bit as far as the activities that are on the square after January 1st. So trying to just keep that area clear for, yes, the month of December and maybe a little bit of the start of January. And after that, I don't know, there's not much that really goes on in the square. We can talk about how the January snowstorms can all be piled back up. But yeah, December, 1 month out of the year, let's look at the potential to minimize the amount of snow that goes in that square, just so that you can continue with the activities that happen up there.
Dan, have you heard any concerns from the chamber or anything, or any other businesses there in the square?
Haven't heard any concerns. On the chamber, as a business owner, as a father of small kids, I do know that kids like to play on those piles. But I agree with Scott's point, especially having more snow earlier in the year. Like when Santa was there, it was much harder it looked nice, but it was harder to navigate with so many people on the square. And then, like, just from a representative of East Troy, as the season progresses, it's usually just like a gray pile by the end. No, that's just how it is.
I mean,
but
I
do
think that's
know
how it is everywhere.
Yeah.
My driveway, too.
And this isn't a concern from me, this is from people that talk to me about the sand in the square, the difficulty they had navigating up there, wanting to see some of the dance performances that were happening up there, that they couldn't even stand around to do it. An elderly woman that came to me and talked to me about it was really dangerous for her to walk around up there because it was just hard to navigate through that area, being that all the snow cover with the piles and whatnot. So this isn't just me. This is something that I'm bringing, what's happening, what questions I'm getting from the people in the community.
And that's a good point, because the actual sidewalks were clear, but it was just that they were being used for the event, so that pushed everyone off to the side, and it was pretty slushy and more than we're used to for that specific event. So that makes sense, those complaints.
So we're, today's the 15th. The snow's here. I don't think we're proposing moving it.
Well, this is just discussion for
Yeah.
maybe next year, if we have this large amount of snow that comes again next year in December, that maybe we look at other opportunities, other possibilities, not this year,
So
but next time.
Yeah, so can you guys put together, let's just see how the rest of the month goes, weather-wise. As we were talking before the meeting, it was like 2008. And, kind of if December 2026 is just like December 2025, what would that mean, right? What would that mean cost-wise? Try to estimate some of that, and just, to Scott's point, just kind of at least then we could look at it and go, okay, that's $100,000. Oof, that's a lot of money, right? Or, no, and we can do some of the suggestions about with the truck beds and so forth. Just, you guys don't make any changes, but come back with, here in January, what you think, if you were to redo this month, kind of some of the things we talked about, what would that look like?
Well, this was a rare.
Yeah. See, you had to say something.
Yeah. Well, Jeremy, you know that. So, a lot of times we were up for long hours. So this will add maybe a day or two, right? So that's one of the concerns. Also, where do you put the snow? Kids dig tunnels in these snow like crazy. So I always worry about them collapsing. If we're dumping snow somewhere, if there's a kid inside there, it's happened. I mean, there's been many times where we get a lot of snow in a cul-de-sac, we go push it up, and there's kids in it. You always got to get out, check around. He's everywhere you go, because you never know if there's a kid's going to be in them or not. But it's concerning too, because if we're done, we got another day or two of being up at 1 a.m, again, for however many hours it's going to take us.
I don't think that my suggestion is by any means asking you to work another overtime shift. What I'm identifying is just another opportunity to look at
Right.
where it can be put, and then maybe at a later date, come back, after the snow has fallen, you're done falling, you've gone home, you've had the rest, you can come back in. Maybe it happens on a Friday, and then you don't come back until Monday to then deal with the snow that's maybe piled up in that parking lot or off to some other area. Maybe find some other spots. That's just one suggestion.
And I agree with that, but like Jason touched on, if it's wet snow and it ices up, then we got a whole new set of problems.
I think we can take a look at some options and see what we can bring back. Like I said, brainstorm a little more and see what we can come up with.
Yeah, and by no means are we identifying anything about you guys working more overtime. That's not what I'm talking about at all in here. Just
No, I
a
get it.
different redistribution of where that snow will go.
No, I get it. We're in a unique position. We have a square. We don't, we're in a unique, other communities don't have that.
I've been on the board almost 10 years, and I've never had somebody call me to complain about the job you guys do clearing the roads. And my only complaint is Derek seems to go by my house when I'm out there shoveling. So, and he looks really happy when he does it too.
I hate to admit this, but I think that was me this year.
Yeah, I think that was. So, I think last year he went and big smile. Thanks. So, other than that, you guys do an outstanding job. I know you've been busy this month. Thank you for all that you guys do in the early mornings and late nights.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, and then we'll come up with something. We'll do some brainstorming, and worst case scenario, we try it and it doesn't work. And
Okay.
try something different.
And you got to consider breakdowns too, if a truck's broke or
Yep.
something on the blower or whatever.
So, all right.
Thank you, guys. All right, item 6, review School Street Lift Station landscape plan. Jason?
Okay, just wanted you guys to take a look at this. I know it's been a concern in the past about what the aesthetics of the current school street lift station look like, and I just wanted to run it by you and see if anybody had any concerns or anything they would like to see differently. Obviously, we're getting all the equipment inside of the building now, or inside a building. Currently, we don't have a building. The generator is sitting outside. That's been an issue for neighbors over the years. And I think what we're proposing addresses those concerns, but I just wanted you all to take a peek at it and provide any feedback.
So, Jason, when we did just the arborvitaes around the perimeter of that generator, those didn't last all that well.
Yeah, actually, the challenge with those is the deer. The deer got to them, and about 4 to 5 feet up, they ate them. Is what happened. So I think we're talking about I know they do make deer-proof foliage. So the other thing I need to point out is I learned this last Friday that large maple tree, unfortunately, is going to go away. One of the goals with the project was to try to keep the maple tree, but unfortunately, it did not happen with the reconfiguration of the driveway. So that tree is going to go. So we'll be looking at potentially an alternative for that. We did, if you remember, we did plant those 4 pine trees there probably about 2 years ago now for some screening for the neighbors there.
What about screening, I guess, north to south? So on the west side of that, kind of separating, providing some screening for the Zest property there.
That was the idea with the 4 pine trees that were planted.
So I'm just, sorry, I'm trying to see, so are those,
So
oh,
this
those
is-
are going to stay, oh, that's those right there, okay.
Yeah, so this is actually looking northwest, kind of. Part of the concern I had too with this plan is if you're coming off of School Street, I don't want to create a visibility issue looking down Main Street. So originally, engineering came back with some taller shrubs in there, and I thought, well, that's going to create a visibility issue trying to get out onto Main Street, and I didn't want to create that. So that's when they came back with the shorter ones like this. Or do you feel that there's even a need for something like that with the building? I guess those are the things I'm looking for some direction on.
I mean, the building's an improvement, a significant improvement. It looks similar to what we have in Lake Bluff, is that right?
Yeah, correct.
What do we do for landscaping around the one in Lake Bluff?
Actually, just a few trees is the only thing we have out there.
So this will be quieter, I'm assuming, because of the building?
You will, yes, but you will still hear when the generator exercises, on a monthly basis, or if there's a power outage. It will be quieter than what it is today, but you will still hear a generator.
Okay. And then what about around that wet well cover? Any landscaping there?
No, so there'll be a paved driveway around it, but there won't necessarily be anything around the wet well cover itself. One of the other things we talked about at the meeting the other day is I don't know if a tin roof would make it look any better. Currently, we're showing it with asphalt shingles, which really kind of aligns with what the neighborhood homes are. I don't know if a steel roof would make a difference, or in a good way or a bad way.
I think you need to match something that's more aesthetic to the surrounding buildings. And a steel roof is going to last us a lot longer, but asphalt shingles on a roof that size isn't that expensive.
Yeah, I mean, I would think too, color-wise, I don't know, I know we're kind of going with some natural browns here. I don't know how much you want to match with Overlook Ridge or anything else in, the Zest property or any of those other properties there, that house across the street there.
Yeah, I think it currently is just shown with natural earth tones is the scheme.
Have you heard any feedback from property owners?
I have not. We haven't necessarily reached out to anybody though either.
So what I'd suggest doing is just keeping it consistent with what we have in other buildings within the municipality. That way, when we do have to replace any of the materials, it's like materials on all of them. We're not just trying to, well, that's right, we use blue on this one, and we use brown on that one. I'd like to see it more consistent.
I agree, that makes sense.
I personally don't like the bushes. I'd rather see some trees.
And we could, maybe we could do something, one tree on I guess, the east side of the building. Again, I've got visibility concerns. I don't want to create, and we also, there's not a lot of room over there, but I think, if we did one tree on the east side, that might, one larger tree, instead of bushes.
I just worry that the bushes are going to take more work to maintain to look nice, and
They definitely are a little more maintenance.
yeah, and I like trees. I like the idea of shade.
You're taking down that maple, might as well put a tree back in place of it.
That is a little tricky road to get out on though, so you don't want to block the visibility too much.
Right, the placement of the tree would definitely have to be, further north, I guess, northwest it would be, so that it does not hamper that visibility, because, that could be a problem. Okay, we can do away with the bushes and try to get a couple of trees in there if that's what you all would like to see.
We can always put bushes back later. Okay. Thank you. All right, on to ordinances, resolutions. Ordinance 2025-12, amending section 366-8, sub B, sub 7, pertaining to loud and unnecessary noise. This was our discussion last week, or 2 weeks ago.
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance 2025-12.
Second?
Questions or discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 2, Resolution 2025-19, approving the purchase of parcel RA 376700001 in the East Troy Business Park from Marcus Consolidated LLC, and authorization of the execution of all steps necessary to effectuate the transaction.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution number 2025-19.
I'll second that.
Questions or discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 3, Resolution 2025-21, approving the purchase of 4 lots in the East Troy Business Park and authorization of the execution of all steps necessary to effectuate the transaction.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve resolution 2025-21.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, item B under this is, we had discussed, there is an association. We will need to appoint village officials to serve on that Business Park Association Board of Directors that we're taking over. So Eileen and I kind of went through this and tried to basically assign out positions based upon what people kind of already do anyway. Scott has the good eye for design, so that's why he got nominated for the design board, as his recent comments on the lift station so well illustrated. So that's where these names came from.
I'll recommend the appointments for the East Troy Business Park Association to be effective after the village closes on the property purchased on December 17th, 2025.
I'll second that.
All right, questions or discussion? All's in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right. Resolution 2025-20, resolution to adopt the municipal fee schedule for 2026. And you have a memo here from Danette of a number of changes that were made. Danette, any of these you want to highlight? No. We did in here, just to note, there is a bullet here, consider removing Chapter 185, amusement devices and arcades, that application or license fee. It's not required by the state statutes, and so we would have to update the ordinance if that's the direction we want to go.
The other one that would require an update to the ordinance is the special meeting for plan commissions. We don't have a fee or ordinance associated with that. So if the board's inclined to approve that, we would update that ordinance as well.
So I think we ought to have those ordinance changes brought back. We agree? Yes. Okay. So then we need a motion for approval of this fee schedule, this resolution.
I'll make a motion to approve the 2026 municipal fee schedule with changes as identified. Or
I'll second.
highlighted.
All right, questions or discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, staff reports, municipal court for November 2025. Any questions on that? All right, item 2, November financial report. Questions there? I think we got a good view of that already. Item 3, 2025 PACER ratings. Any questions for Jason? Numbers going up. That's good.
Yeah, slightly. Obviously, we're going to continue to trend that average. I think that'll be an important story to tell.
I like the map. The map is very helpful.
Actually, Derek did the PACER ratings this year. He had some training. He went through a training class on that, and I had him go out and rate the streets. So that worked out pretty well. He did a great job.
Is there, using this map and these in the ratings, so like, where we're starting to see more orange and red and things like that, mapping that to like our capital plan with Ellers, just to kind of maybe revisit that when we put that together?
So the maps I created right out of our GIS database, it's a layer right in. So we overlay that to 4-inch water mains, and that's how we kind of help get pointed in the right direction of the streets we're, going to tackle.
I just know that, like, and I'm sure the rest of the board, like, we get questions, this street's horrible, and it's like, I always love it when I can go, oh, well, that's a county road, and, not a village road, or that's Highway 20, that's not ours. But for some of these, just to say, hey, it looks like that's in, people have asked about, town line, and it's like, okay, being able to lay out, this is what we're doing in 26. So, is that something that we could maybe talk about when we do capital budgeting in 26 for 27? Just like, like I'm picking a road here. South Street is just, it's kind of, orange. Oh, well, that's planned for X date.
Absolutely. So right now, I don't have a pavement plan outside of the 5-year CIP. It is actually something Tim Lynch and I have talked about, coming up with almost another master plan, right, for the streets and the pavement conditions. So
I think it would be helpful to just at least have that information, and we could post this along with that information, and people would go, okay, and if they don't like it, well, then they can write a referendum and, to fund that.
almost like a longer term CIP, right, is what you're kind of getting at?
Yeah, so exactly the same thing you're doing with the utilities. I think it's the same infrastructure. All right. Committee reports, Airport Advisory Committee minutes from November 10th. Jim, anything you want to highlight?
some useful Jason came to the meeting, thank you, last week and provided some useful information that we'll be able to report on next month. But long story short, we're in a waiting period right now. Everything is turned in. We're waiting for the state to respond.
Sometimes Madison moves slow.
We learned all sorts about Madison tonight. Any problems with snow out there with December? For Doug?
I don't think so. Doug's back in the saddle. I think he's been doing a great job keeping up with things out there.
All right, library board minutes from November 11th. Mary, anything you want to highlight?
A couple of things to add. At our last meeting last week, the library board's going to be coming to this board with a request to use some impact fees for the purpose of looking what will the operating O&M needed funding for a new library. So Tammy believes she has found an organization that will be able to help us with that, so we'll be coming with a proposal. So that's one. The other news is the library board was informed that there is a donor who is going to be starting a substantial endowment fund for the library. And I know Tammy has been meeting with Eileen regarding some of the setting up of that. So more news coming on that.
Nice to see that community involvement. Thank you. Any questions for Mary? All right, so we're going to go to closed session. It is a preliminary discussion. It's to discuss bargaining postures and negotiation strategies related to a proposed development and terms related to that development on village-owned property in TID 4, and an offer to purchase a portion of that property, as well as a proposed development and offer to purchase village-owned property located in TID 5. So I will move to go into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 1985 1E to discuss the village's bargaining postures and negotiation strategies with respect to a proposed development and offer to purchase for a portion of village-owned property located on Highway 120 in TID 4, RXUP 00256, and a proposed development and offer to purchase village-owned property in TID 5, RXUP 00149. I need a second.
Second.
All right, roll call, please.
President Johnson?
Yes.
Trustee Harding?
Yes.
Trustee Holm?
Yes.
Trustee Moody?
Yes.
Trustee Nugent? Yes. Trustee Seeger?
Yes.
Trustee Wisniewski?